Hello, I'm Tolu, also known as the Podfather, and I have the pleasure of hosting What Makes You Tick.
Tick, tick, boom. So, Tolu, I am, as you well know, Richard Washington. I'm the founder of Tick Talent. We're delighted to sponsor this week's podcast. We've got a really special guest on this week, Tolu. Tell us a bit about who we've got on for our listeners.
This week is one of our founder special episodes, and it's with Neetha Ratakonda, and she was just awesome, to be honest. I really enjoyed my conversation with her. So I did a pre-chat with her and the conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed both of them. How did you find the episode?
Yeah, loved it. I think it reminded me a little bit of our wonderful podcast with Yelena Harbuck, who's one of my all-time favorite pods. But just a huge amount of curiosity, a load of congruence and passion. These people are living their purpose. And I just think it's such an inspiring thing to hear people with different perspectives who have got some corporate experience, and then they're going out and taking really senior roles as intrapreneurs, or maybe even as entrepreneurs in this case, and just love the conversation. So we had a brilliant conversation. She might even be releasing her own podcast, which is going to be incredible if anyone's listening.
Very good.
Which would be amazing. But I think there's a huge amount of value here for anyone that's thinking about starting a business, for anyone that really cares about sort of staying on the bleeding edge of technology, and anyone that really believes in the power of relationships. So without further ado, Tolu, let's roll the VT.
Neetha, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tolu. This is an interesting title that you have. So I thought it was very interesting to chat about what makes us tick.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it. And I think you've got a really interesting story. So I'm really excited to get into a bit more. What makes you tick, Neetha?
After you asked me that question, I was thinking about it. And this was probably one of the few times in a long time that I actually thought about it. I think everything that I do, I have one sort of underlying desire. And it seems a little bit too altruistic, but really, I definitely want to leave the world a slightly better place than when I came in. That really is the overarching desire. And that's really, I think, really what makes me tick in whatever I try to do.
And where do you think that came from?
I think it comes from family. It comes from just my background, having been to different places. I lived in multiple places all over the world growing up. It wasn't just India. I lived in Brazil, was in Africa and all those places. So it sort of gives you this exposure that you don't get if you're just staying in one place. And also the kind of education I've had. I mean, I have to say I was super fortunate to have had the amazing education that I've had. Went to a school called Rishi Valley, which is in India. It is by this philosopher called Jiddu Krishnamurti. He's very famous. So it wasn't a traditional education where they talk about just why are you in this world? Why do you, what is fear? Why do you really do certain things? Kids, they used to ask us these questions, right? So I think it's a combination of all of this.
And why did you move around so much?
Well, my dad was in a kind of a job that sort of took him around. Even within India, we would never live more than 3 years in a place. We would literally pack our bags every 3 years and move. So we were forced to actually make friends every time we went. It was starting from scratch, a new city. It wouldn't be just a new school. It would be a completely new city. So, yeah.
And what are some of the things you think that instilled in you as a person?
Yeah, I think one thing is trying to figure out and navigate the situation you're in, make the best of it, because you're there. That you can't control. You just can't. You're put in a new school where there's everybody knows everybody. You're a new kid. How do you get along? I think how do you figure out, to navigate the situation and get along? Those are the two things that I can talk to any person. I can literally if I go somewhere, a complete stranger, I can make a conversation. So that I think is one of my superpowers.
Yeah, because even from our first chat, you're very warm and you're very easy to talk to. So I can definitely see that.
Yeah, well, force of circumstances. So.
And did you get to watch your dad work much? And did you take anything from that?
My dad was very conscientious about his work, super disciplined. He is probably the most disciplined person I've ever seen in all my life to date. If you had to do something, and discipline is about doing things that you don't feel like doing, but you have to do it, right? And it's supposed to be done. It's that discipline, right? Wherever in the world, he traveled a lot. So wherever in the world he went, he had to do his morning exercise. He had to do his morning spiritual practice. He had, oh my God, I'm like, it's raining. It's not a good day, but he would go for a walk, so very disciplined, very conscientious that he had to do his job the best way possible. So I think that those kind of values definitely came in from me. I'm not as disciplined as he is. I wish I could be, but I'm not. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love seeing how people's family impacts what they choose to do.
Absolutely. And trust me, I've been very fortunate in my upbringing to have had all these role models to look up to.
That's amazing. So you mentioned earlier about you wanted to leave the world a slightly better place than when you came into it. And you're part of our founder series. So the company that you founded, how is that part of leaving the world a better place than where you found it for you?
Excellent question. I'm going to go back to a little bit of a core belief that I have, which is there's only finite resources, right, in this world, right? And you got to use them the best way possible. So if you extrapolate that, that's one of the reasons I look at how do you become more efficient, whether as a human being or as a business, as whatever it is, right? Efficiency for me is a way of life, honestly. So the way it works is if I try to do something and I see that it has to be repeated, I try to make it make it a template, make it a workflow, try to do that so I don't have to redo whatever I did before. Similarly, I am really big into sustainability. I think we really have to look at all the wastages happening in this world in terms of just being unsustainable. But that perspective, I'm looking at wastages in business processes, and that really is what drives me, right? You have human intellect being wasted. You have time being wasted. You have money being wasted just because of inefficiencies in business processes, right? If you look at the amount of wastage in terms of dollars, it runs into trillions of dollars every year. Trillions. Wow. And if you look at just go-to-market processes, which is marketing, sales, and CS, which is really the most critical set of processes for a business. You're making money that way. They're also usually the most expensive processes in a business, right? They are the least efficient. They literally are the least efficient. So I am looking at this from the perspective of a business process improvement. How do you improve your go-to-market or revenue-generating processes? Let's talk about revenue-generating processes, right? How do you improve them? That is why we exist. We want businesses to achieve their peak revenue potential by making their revenue engine more efficient. And what does the revenue engine consist of? It consists of your processes, your people, and technology. Unfortunately, because of all of this, you not only are you wasting just the revenue, there's human beings doing things manually on a daily basis. You're not even counting that. You're just counting the dollars that you're not making because of the wastages. But look at the human intellect being wasted, right? So we want to fix that. That's why we exist.
I love that. And you're absolutely speaking my language, because I think that so many people come into roles, especially in sales roles, and they do things the way that they were done before. And those things might have been done like that for 15, 20 years when we didn't have the technology that we have now that they could be using. So yeah, you're absolutely speaking my language.
Yeah, that's one of the things. And I think this whole bringing the efficiency into different parts of life is something I truly believe in.
And within your journey, you've had a really interesting path, because you've come from a lot more of the technical side of things in terms of your becoming a founder. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey and how you ended up solving this particular problem within companies.
Sure. So started off as a computer science engineer. I did my undergrad from a place called Osmania University in India, then a master's in CS from Stanford. Right off the bat, got into startups. I love the energy of a startup and the concept of a startup, right? You have an idea, and now that idea needs to be, you work on the idea and make it something that's useful for human beings, right? And how do you make human beings get value out of it? Other companies, other human beings get value out of it. That's just so energizing. I always worked for startups. Those startups got acquired and got into larger companies so we stayed in those larger companies like Cisco, but yeah, worked always for startups. At one point, I really wanted to explore what I want, some of the options that I had in terms of, starting a company. So I did start one company before this one. And that's when I sort of dove into the non-engineering world. I had, glimpses of it as being an engineering leader, but I was never directly selling or never directly marketing. I did talk to customers. So I was interfacing with customers from the perspective of engineering, what problems they have, what bugs do they have, and how bad is the bug? How do you fix it? And stuff like that. But never from the perspective of looking at the problem from their perspective. I was always feature oriented. I would always say, hey, we have this feature. This is what the tech does. And that's what my entire world was until I did my first startup. The first startup also, we were selling through channel partners mostly. So because we were selling into different verticals where I did not have personal connections and we were selling into channel partners. So that was a different kind of selling. But right now with this startup, I am literally sitting down and talking to customers and selling, which is direct one-to-one selling, right? So it's been very interesting. You have to exercise a different part of the brain to be able to sell and market, which is very different because you have to look at the problem from the customer's perspective or the prospects or the potential buyer's perspective, which is very different from what I had done all my life.
Yes.
So the biggest learning for me in this journey has been to rewire my brain to look at it from that side, talk about it from that side. So it's been incredibly uncomfortable, but I think challenging. So yeah.
Yeah, I think technical people, so I come from a data and analytics background.
Yeah.
And you do so much work, right? And people care about maybe 10 or 20% of it. And I think that's really difficult when you come from a background where you've done all the technical things, but then you have to switch to commercial. I think that's a really big shift.
Yeah, the shift is also, you're so proud about having built this module, or it does this, and this. I used, these 4 technologies. That is so cool, all of that stuff. But, at the end of it, is it really solving a problem which is important enough? It's not just solving a problem. Is it solving a problem that is important enough, painful enough for a prospect, for them to open up their wallet and give you money to buy? That is so different from anything that I've done before. So the last few years have been just rewiring my brain, trying to, to talk and figure out that perspective of business. Yeah.
That's so true. And how have you been learning to rewire your brain? Is it through content? Do you have mentors? How have you been doing that?
Oh, I think everything. I mean, trust me, it's been everything. One of the most important things that I did, and shout out to Pavilion on this one, is I joined a group called Pavilion, which is a go-to-market leaders group. And that sort of accelerated my learning, right? About how do you there's a whole bunch of classes and courses that you can take there. That sort of accelerated my learning there. In addition to that, books. Oh my God. If you look at my Kindle, I think 80% of them are either something to do with sales or something to do with messaging or something to do with positioning. So 80% of my Kindle is probably that. Podcasts, LinkedIn, everything. I mean, everything, videos, online courses. So pretty much devoured that I still have a lot to learn, but yeah. And also what has happened, Tolu, is that in the past year, so the timing has been critical. Before, the way that, I was in startups and we've built products which were sold in a certain way. The way those products were sold, which was very deep tech hardware focused kind of products, is very different than how you sell B2B SaaS, number one. Number two, because of COVID, the way you sell, and we're a COVID company, so we started during COVID. So the way you sell took a dramatically different turn after, because of COVID, because people weren't in front of each other. They were consuming, you didn't need to talk to a salesperson. Buyers are consuming information from all over and then deciding. So if you want to sell, you have to sort of influence all the different places. You have to be able to put, yourself out in all the different places that the buyers are going to consume information from. That also is a dramatic, I think that's something even traditional sellers, people who were selling before, had to learn. Now, me coming in from engineering background, trying to sell and then learn to handle this dramatic shift in buying and selling was a huge amount of learning for us. Yeah.
And do you think it's different selling as a founder or as someone probably like lower in the organization? What are some of the differences that you've seen with that as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm still doing founder-led sales. I just hired an SDR to get me generate some pipeline just recently. It was entirely founder-led sales, but the reason is the founders are the ones who intimately know the problem that you're trying to solve. And we did a lot of market research before we we actually built the product. We spoke to hundreds of revenue leaders to understand what is really the pain. So having had that background about the pain and understanding that domain is one part of it, but also the fact that the founder will push themselves to almost no limit to get something done. Whereas, maybe, I'm not saying everybody, but most people who join later might not have that kind of a drive. So there's a slight difference there. But to scale, you really need people who can take that message that the founder is how the way the founder sells and replicate it. Again, you got to have the systematized process to replicate that. I totally believe in this whole startup journey. And also you need to understand that what is the set of customers that will buy your product more readily than the others, right? There's going to be some that are not going to find this as compelling, but there's going to be some because of their situation and what's happening with them in that company and, whatever the kind of team they have, certain circumstances that they'll say, hey, I'll buy it. So you got to find those signals. And for us to figure it out as founders, what those signals are takes time. So once you figure that out and you get to a critical mass of customers and you get to a certain amount of revenue, where you have testimonials, where you have people saying, talking about it, and you do all of that stuff, I think then getting on some sellers who can sort of replicate this would be phenomenal. That's when you sort of accelerate and scale what you've already done.
I'm really curious about what are some of the practical things people can do to make sure that transition from founder-led selling to more of the kind of the team-led selling, that it's really successful. I'm wondering what some of the practical things that you've seen be successful.
I think one of the most important thing is figuring out how to get to repeatable sales. If you're doing B2B sales, what are the kind of companies and what are the circumstances under which they will buy your product? Number one, who in the company? Because also the who in the company is hugely important, right? Who in the company is going to be your champion or who's going to actually want to use the product? And once you sort of figure that out, the fact that you're able to do repeatable sales with less friction and you're able to provide value to the users in the company, I think that if you've sort of figured out really well with a very narrow kind of, identifying from the signals that you can identify, at that point, bringing them on and saying, and just having a process. Saying, this is exactly what you look for. This is what and then, they learn. Obviously, I think that's what it is. That's what the biggest challenge is.
And you just mentioned challenges. What are some of the challenges that you've had as a founder?
I think for me, like I said, I think figuring out the whole go-to-market side of things was obviously challenging because I was always talking in terms of features and I love tech. I really love the fact that there's so much cool technology that you use to do things, but it's not just about the tech. What is the tech doing for the customer? How is the customer even, exactly. It's all about value, right? Changing your conversation from, hey, we built this cool thing. It has, 20 features versus, this is going to do this for you. This is how your day is going to be dramatically better because you're using our product, or this is where you get your time back, or, whatever. Those conversations, I think was one of the challenges. And the second challenge for me was, and it's still a challenge, is how do you get word out? right?
Yeah.
Like I just said, selling is not just about reaching the prospect. It's not just about sending them a collateral and saying, okay, let's have a conversation. It's about being in those places or being mentioned, or they need to see you in those places where they get their information. Or so that part of it is I think still a challenge. We're still trying to figure that out. It's all been sort of go to market challenges for us. And I think the other thing, navigating the downturn has been so difficult. It's been very difficult. We sort of launched the product in 22. We had a bunch of pilots. Then the downturn happened. There were some of our champions laid off. So it was a challenging 23.
What have you done to overcome that challenge?
Macroeconomic conditions, I can't do much about. You just have to, just be resilient and say, okay, what do I do in this period? Is there something else that I can do to create more value? Is there something that I can provide to customers to create more value? It's all about value. I mean, if a customer sees value in whatever market conditions, they will end up engaging with you sooner or later. It's just being later. It's now more later than sooner. So you just have to hang in there for the macroeconomic, conditions, economic conditions. You can't do much. On the other side, constant learning, constantly trying to do things. So things like I used to post pretty frequently on LinkedIn, but then I had a gap in the middle, couldn't post and couldn't do much of the social media stuff that I used to do. Getting back into doing that. I was just talking to you about, hey, what do? I want to do a podcast. So I think getting yourself out nowadays, you really need to put yourself out there, talk about your beliefs and what you really stand for people to actually trust you. And everything is based on trust, right? I'm not shy in that way, but I think it's just that you just have to get used to it. Those are the things that I think we're doing.
I think you hit on a really important point, because I think the personal part of the personal brand is so much more important now than it's ever been, where you have so much more access to founders and CEOs than we've ever had before. So people really care now about, okay, who am I actually engaging with? Who am I buying from? Do I align with them? Do I connect with them? So yeah, I think you're so right.
Oh, 100%. I think that part of it. And also I think I need to do a lot more in-person meetings and conversations, attending more events, just trying to find more hours in the day.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So what was your journey into leadership like?
I took on engineering leader roles first before all of this, right? I feel like it wasn't a struggle for me as much. I think I really like this idea of a cohesive team working together, being sort of knowing each other really well. And it's almost like a family outside a family, right? So I have that concept. So I think it wasn't too difficult. Yeah. I don't think that was very difficult.
I think I'm quite torn on, the concept of family outside of family, because I think that I love the idea of that love and enjoyment that you get from family. I think sometimes where people struggle with that concept is that families can be really dysfunctional, and sometimes you put up with stuff just because they're family. How do you create that great side of family environment, but weed out the bad side of family environment?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say it's exactly like a family, but just what, when we were in person, I was spending way more time with my team than I ever did with my own family, right? So you should have people that you like, that you're working with, that you trust. I think there's these human things, for example, trust and just being with people you like I just said. All of these things are important, right? Or get along. If you do, I mean, obviously not everybody's going to be that way. You might have somebody that you have sort of a little bit of an abrasive personality or whatever. You just deal with it. You just chat with, figure out a way to get around that personality, because everybody wants to connect. How do you connect? I think it's a human need to connect. So how do you connect with this person versus the other? So that's pretty much it. I think if you have those connections, and trust me, it can happen. It is possible. The first job that I took, I worked with the same team for almost 10 years because that company was acquired by another company, but then the founder split and did another startup where I went in as an early founder. So the same sort of group of people I worked with for 10 years, those people are like my family. I mean, honestly, they are amazing group of people that I still am in touch with and I really respect. They're like my family. So I think it is possible. It's just that we need to figure out a way to do it. Obviously, to your question, people, I mean, if there's somebody not living, not doing what they're supposed to do or whatever, executing in a way that's conducive for the team, you have to go chat with them, have a call, have a talk, and then see what happens. What is it that they are thinking that's not sort of resonating with the rest of the team?
So I think it is sometimes that accountability side of things that lets people down, because in a family situation, you often wouldn't call out your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother. You wouldn't necessarily do that. And I think you're so right, being able to have those conversations and hold people accountable, because you still have to have standards of performance and delivery,
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges or some of the things that you had to learn to grow as a leader?
So by the time I took on a engineering leadership role, we were in a larger company in Cisco. And Cisco and any large company that you look at has a structure to it, right? Whether it's your compensation structure, the performance reviews, bonus payouts or whatever. I think that was the part that was the most difficult for me. I think that definitely was challenging.
And what about from the people leadership side of things?
I think the people leadership, so Tolu, this is my fundamental belief, right? As long as they trust you and you are doing right by them and that trust builds over time, I think things work out. I really think that's what it is. You're working with other human beings. It's, they're not an employee or a reportee or whatever. They're all human beings. They need to know that they're valued. You have their back. You will do what is good for them in whatever way, and you're taking care of them. I think it matters under the circumstances. Obviously, some circumstances are going to be, like in a large company, there's going to be certain circumstances you can't do anything, but within the circumstances, you're doing the best you can.
Yeah, and I think that's a balance that a lot of mature people have, is they understand that, look, you really do have my best interest at heart, but also you're not the person that's got the final decision. Sometimes you are going to have to do stuff that you don't want to do, but I think that transparency really helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any adjustments that you've had to make going from being a leader in an organization to being a founder?
Oh yeah. I mean, the scope of things when you're sort of a leader is sort of structured. I mean, it's limited or it's well defined. The scope is really well defined. You have to worry about this, and that's all you have to worry about. Founder, you have to sort of think about everything under the sun about this company.
Yeah.
Right? From hey, how do I get funding? How does this product work? Is the customer going to be happy? Are you even going in the right direction? Everything, right? Who do I hire? How do I file taxes? the not so fun things. How do I get these taxes filed? What kind of compliances do I need to worry about? It's everything under the sun. I think it's a lot of things that you have to think about. Yeah, that's where you need really good people to sort of take on responsibilities. Yeah.
And how did you go about assembling your founding team?
Very interesting. So some of the people in my engineering team worked with me in prior companies. So we were all working together, and they sort of came in with me into Big Little. My co-founder and I knew each other for many years when I was, in the Bay Area, and we have a lot of common friends. I needed somebody with sort of the business background, non-technical background, because I have the technical background. So I think my co-founder fits that bill. And that's how we sort of started with the team. My team consists of just me, my co-founder, and the engineering team. Right now, we've hired just one go-to-market SDR, and that's it. You don't have too many of. It's still very engineering heavy. The good part about this is I live in the US. My engineering team is in India, but the engineering team is led by amazing people that have worked with me before. So there's a sense of trust, right? Yeah. They already know how we function together, and we've gone through challenges and stuff like that. So that way, I think it's really important to have people that know you and worked with you before.
Absolutely. So just as we close, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was about being a minority founder, whether it's being a person of color or being a female founder. I'd love to hear some of your experiences with that.
Yeah, so I never considered myself any different from this is my reality, right? I'm living it every day. I'm a founder. I'm running a business. I don't consider myself special or different. But when I do see statistics like, women get less than 2% of funding, or women-owned businesses do so much better, but the support or the funding they get is not proportionate to how their businesses do, it bothers me. So for me, there is no way to compare. I just know what's happening to me is my reality. There's no way for me to disguise myself into something else and try to figure out how that would work in the same pitch. There's no way for me to do that. So it's just about navigating what you're dealt with. Again, it's the same thing. You're put in a situation like I was in different schools as I was growing up, and you just figure out a way to navigate, right? But it is unfortunate that these statistics exist, right? The fact that there's so little funding, disproportionately low funding for women founders. If you look at women as a group, a cohort of founders, and I know a lot of women founders, we tend to be very realistic. We don't exaggerate. There's no exaggeration of results or whatever we're doing. Very grounded. Most of us are super conservative on spend. So most likely a business run by a woman is going to be profitable much earlier than an average man, right? So with all of these things together, why would you not fund a woman? And one other thing, in most cultures, including mine, for a girl to actually get to a point of education, the kind of education I've been fortunate, but you look at a whole bunch of people to get to, say, the kind of education that they get to, build a company and handle a whole bunch of societal norms that you're sort of forced to be in. They would have had to go through much more hardship to become a founder than an average male, or the so-called white male. I'm not going to say white male as a generic thing, but whatever. Let's take that as a control group, right? Now, if you have somebody running a company with all of these hardships and all of these challenges, and they're doing well, don't you already have a person who has a resilience and the propensity to win?
Yeah.
Because they've already gone through so many of those hurdles, right? They're really the ones that have gone through these tough challenges to get to where they are and doing it. I just don't get it. But for me, I haven't experienced it, but this is my reality. So I don't know how different it would be if I was somebody else. But yeah, it's not great to see those statistics.
Something I was intrigued about is that a lot of your education was in India, right? And in India, you're not a minority. So, for example, I come from Nigeria. In Nigeria, I'm not a minority. But when I'm now in England, I'm a minority. So I'm really intrigued as to how you find it going from a place where you're not a minority to a place where you are, because people see you slightly differently, but you don't have that same mindset that they do.
Oh, but you know what? I've been in different countries growing up, so I already know how it feels to be out of don't look the same.
Yeah,
so I grew up in Brazil. Brazilian. I went to a completely American school. I was pretty much, me and my brother were pretty much the only, and one other person was pretty much the only brown kids in the school. So
wow.
I've already seen that. I've already been through it. So, like I said, we were put into different situations and said, okay, you deal with the new school, deal with the city. We just dealt with it. So I don't think for me, US was not. I mean, it's not, because and I ended up in Stanford, and it's a lot of Indians. No, I don't think that was I didn't feel out of place at all. But one thing I do want to tell you is that I'm not a minority in India, but in India, women have to sort of deal with a lot of challenges to get to a point of, getting to, having a professional career or even growing in that professional career, right? Because even though the families that I come from, there's a lot of support for women. There's a lot of support. We never had to deal with. We were very fortunate, but as a society, I think there is still women still have to fight hard. Mm. It's not easy. It's really not easy. I think you just deal with it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we close, we have our closing tradition, which is tick fire questions. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
If you could do your own podcast, who would your first guest be?
Oh, wow. That's a trick one. That's a tricky one. If I could get anybody I wanted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Dead or alive?
Yeah, there's this lady who's the CEO of Lens. She's out of I think China.
Okay.
Oh, I'd love to get her. I forgot her name, but she's an inspiration. I mean, the way she grew the company, and they provide pretty much all the screens for all the smartphones.
Wow.
You should look it up. I'm gonna send you the link.
Yeah, send me the link. Okay. At this stage of your career, what is your definition of success?
For me, it's about being content with the way the things are going. I don't want to be in a situation where I feel guilty doing this and doing that, or spending too much time at work, or I want to be content with the way that things are going. For example, I want to travel to some place, I can just go there, travel, stay there for 2 months, work from there. I want that kind of a life. I think that's success to me. The kind of lifestyle that I want, getting to that point and being content with it is what I think is success for me.
Since you become a founder, what have been some of the biggest wins that you've enjoyed?
Getting that product out, the first version, and launching it and having somebody use it was definitely a huge win. Every time, and the biggest thing was the first contract that we got. Oh my God, I'm going to frame it and keep it. You feel you're so happy that somebody actually paid for the product that you made. That's the other thing, right? Even now, when I have a conversation with someone and do a demo and they say, wow, if only I had this product, when I was doing whatever, that really gives me so much joy. So yeah, I think these are the small things that really matter.
Amazing. And if you could wave a magic wand, and you'd mentioned earlier about sustainability being really important for you, if you could wave a magic wand and change something about the way that we do sustainability, what would it be?
I would just wave a magic wand and get rid of all the things that we've done to the earth. I mean, seriously, I was just mentioning it to you. There's microplastics in breast milk. I mean, come on. I mean, what have we done, right? The amount of wastage, garbage that is generated is just crazy. Everything's going to the landfill. The kind of, just everything put together, right? How many cars we drive, how much of AC we have, how much of energy consumption we have, right? You look at big, large cities, there's lights on everywhere. And when there's nobody in there, I mean, all of these things matter, small things. How much of greenhouse gases our factories are emitting into the environment? These are huge problems, but we have to tackle them at one point, one by one, right? So small steps get to those big goals. That's one of the reasons we named the company BigLittle.ai is your big dreams can only will be achieved by your small steps. You got to take small steps. Come on.
I love that.
It's about, hey, do I really need to buy this right now? There's so much of consumerism, right? Yeah. Everybody's hoarding stuff, right? And that creates a lot of waste as well. So small things. For example, I finish a bottle of juice. Now, what happens to this bottle? Nobody really knows. I mean, that awareness needs to come in and think about. I think everybody needs to know what's happening to the environment, to planet Earth. We're just messing it up.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think the awareness is just so low. Like we just don't think about it.
We don't think about it. That's the problem. Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
And my last question for you is, what are the top 3 things that you're looking for in someone that you're hiring?
I think the ability to just, for the stage that we're in, I think some things that can't be taught, right? Most important is being able to work in sort of a nebulous environment, in the sense it's ambiguous, right? Your role is ambiguous. It's not, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and you're done. Being, working in that situation and doing whatever it takes. So that attitude, I think, is not something that people can learn. It's something that you get. You're thrown into something, you figure out, and you go ahead. It's about just taking whatever you're given and going with that.
Amazing. Neetha, thank you so much for being on What Makes You Tick, and we've really enjoyed having you on, and I know this will help a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Hey, Tolu, thank you for the opportunity. That was a great conversation. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much.